Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
Nobody expected sparks to fly when Cher walked onto The View. She thought it would be a routine sit-down to promote her new music and talk about a decades-long career. But Joy Behar had other plans. With her trademark sharp tongue, Joy steered the conversation away from Cher's accomplishments and toward her outspoken views on politics, aging in Hollywood, and money. What started as playful banter quickly spiraled into something darker. Joy pushed harder, Cher pushed back, and suddenly the air in the studio felt charged. The audience didn't know whether to clap or hold their breath. By the time Cher leaned across the table with fire in her eyes, even Whoopi and Sonny realized this wasn't just another heated exchange. It was a full-blown clash of icons. The confrontation became one of the most talked-about moments in daytime TV, proving once again that Cher doesn't just sing about being strong, she lives it. Stay tuned, because what happens when Joy Behar tries to corner Cher isn't just a fight, it's television history.
The studio lights beamed brighter than usual that morning, reflecting the anticipation that hung in the air. The audience had come prepared for a treat. Cher, the living legend, the goddess of pop herself, was set to sit down with the hosts of The View. For decades, she had been an icon not just in music, but in culture, fashion, and activism. Everyone expected laughter, nostalgia, and maybe even a few spontaneous jokes about her glittering career. When Cher walked onto the stage, dressed in a sleek black pantsuit paired with her signature long flowing hair, the crowd erupted. She blew a kiss to the audience, slid into her seat, and smiled at the panel. Whoopi, as always, kept things grounded, while Sonny and Anna welcomed her warmly. It should have been a moment of celebration, but, as often happens on The View, Joy Behar had another idea. "Cher," Joy began, leaning in with a grin that looked harmless at first. "You look incredible, honestly. I mean, who would believe you're your age? You must have some kind of deal with the universe, or maybe just a really good surgeon." The audience laughed nervously. Cher's smile stiffened, but she played along. "Well, Joy," she said smoothly, "I've worked hard to stay healthy, and I'm lucky to still be doing what I love. But trust me, it's not about magic or surgery. It's about willpower." The tension was subtle, but it was there. Cher's fans knew she didn't shy away from honesty, and Joy's remark was a backhanded compliment that hit just a little too close. The conversation drifted toward Cher's career highlights. Whoopi praised her for constantly reinventing herself. Sonny asked about her wellness platform for working mothers. Cher spoke with passion about the challenges women face balancing family and work, explaining how her new project aimed to create resources for those caught in the middle. The audience applauded, but Joy wasn't letting go. "You know, Cher," Joy interjected, putting on a naive expression, "people love your reinventions, but some say you're always chasing relevance. Do you ever feel like maybe it's time to just slow down, enjoy retirement?" The crowd went quiet. Cher tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "Retirement?" she repeated, almost amused. "Joy, I don't really believe in that word. I've been told to slow down since I was 30. If I'd listened, I wouldn't be here today." The applause this time was louder, sharper. Cher's words carried that defiant spark her fans adored. But Joy wasn't satisfied. "Well, sure," Joy said, shrugging, "but at some point, don't you think it's a little much? You've had your moment. Don't younger artists deserve the spotlight?" It was a bold jab, even for Joy. The other co-hosts shifted uncomfortably. Jennifer Hudson, who was guest hosting that day, leaned forward, ready to change the subject, but Cher beat her to it. "Let me tell you something," Cher said, her voice steady but firm. "Joy, I've been in this business long enough to know that there's room for everyone. If a young artist can't shine because I'm still out here, then maybe they need to work a little harder. I'm not apologizing for surviving." That line hit like a thunderclap. The studio filled with applause, the kind that lingers and builds. Joy leaned back in her chair, lips pressed together, while the rest of the panel exchanged uneasy glances. What was supposed to be a celebratory interview had just taken on a much sharper edge. As the segment wrapped, Whoopi promised they'd get into some deeper stuff after the break. The audience buzzed with excitement. Everyone knew this wasn't just another morning chat. Something electric had sparked, and it was only the beginning.
When the cameras came back from commercial, the mood on set was noticeably heavier. The studio audience, still buzzing from Cher's sharp responses, leaned forward in anticipation. Something about the exchange between her and Joy had shifted the air. It wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a standoff. Whoopi tried to bring things back to neutral ground. "All right," she said with her signature calm authority. "We're talking to Cher, a legend in her own right, about her new project and the changes she's seen in the industry. And I think everyone here can agree she's seen it all." The audience applauded warmly, and Cher smiled, clearly appreciative. But just as Whoopi started to transition to Sunny's question, Joy jumped back in. "Sure, she's seen it all," Joy said, her voice laced with a dry laugh. "But sometimes seeing it all doesn't mean you should still be doing it all. I mean, Cher, don't you think there comes a point when you've got to hand the mic over? It's not just about you, it's about making space." Gasps scattered through the studio, followed by murmurs. The tension was no longer subtle, it was undeniable. Cher took a beat before answering. She leaned back in her chair, then forward, elbows resting on the table, her eyes locked on Joy. "Joy," she said slowly, "with all due respect, I don't need anyone to make space for me. I've worked for every inch of ground I stand on. And if people still want to hear me sing or listen to what I have to say, that's their choice, not yours." The audience applauded warmly, and whistles cutting through the clapping. Cher's fans were clearly in the crowd, and they weren't about to let Joy's comment slide unnoticed. Sunny tried to redirect the conversation, asking Cher about her advocacy for women in the workforce and her views on economic equality. Cher answered passionately, explaining how women over 50 often get sidelined in professional spaces, despite having experience and wisdom. "That's part of what my platform is about," Cher explained, reminding people that women, regardless of age, are not disposable. It was a strong, inspiring point, but Joy wasn't done. She leaned across the table, voice sharp. "But don't you think you're a little hypocritical? You talk about making room for other women, but isn't continuing to dominate the spotlight the opposite of that? How does a 70-something still taking center stage help younger women trying to break through?" The room erupted, some clapping, others groaning in disbelief. The split reaction only heightened the drama. Cher's face hardened. "Hypocritical," she repeated, her voice firm. "Joy, do you know what it's like to be a woman in music, constantly told you're too old, too much, too outdated? If I'd believed that, I'd have disappeared decades ago. Instead, I stayed, and that's not hypocrisy, that's survival. That's showing younger women that you don't have to vanish because someone else says your time is up." The crowd cheered so loudly that Whoopi had to motion for quiet. Cher's tone wasn't just defensive, it was fierce. A lifetime of experience sharpened into every word. Joy rolled her eyes, clearly frustrated by the roaring applause, but she pressed. "But don't you see how it looks? At some point, people might think you're just clinging, that maybe the legacy should be enough instead of constantly trying to prove something." The word clinging seemed to hang in the air like a challenge. Cher leaned forward, her voice lower now, but more powerful than before. "Let me tell you something, Joy. I don't cling. I fight. There's a difference. I've reinvented myself 100 times because people kept trying to push me out, and every time I proved them wrong. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe that says more about you than it does about me." The audience gasped, then broke into wild applause again. Some even stood up, clapping and cheering. Joy laughed bitterly, waving her hands as if to dismiss the reaction, but her jaw tightened. Ama Navarro, trying to ease the escalating heat, jumped in with a soft laugh. Ladies, ladies, let's remember there's room for legends and rising stars, right? We don't have to pick one over the other. But the focus had already zeroed in on Cher and Joy. The energy was no longer about a friendly disagreement. It had turned personal. Joy, unwilling to let go, smirked and said, "Well, you're certainly proving you're not going anywhere, but maybe that's the problem." That landed like a sucker punch. The crowd reacted audibly with gasps and groans. Even Whoopi raised her eyebrow, as if signaling to Joy that she'd crossed the line. Cher inhaled deeply, then exhaled slowly, her composure unwavering. "Joy," she said evenly, "the problem, Joy, is when people try to decide what's best for someone else's life, instead of focusing on their own. I've lived my life on my terms. That's why I'm still here." The applause this time was thunderous, filling the studio with the unmistakable energy of a crowd that knew they were witnessing something unforgettable. And as the segment closed again for commercial, everyone watching knew this wasn't cooling down, it was only heating up. The air in the studio had already been thick with tension, but now it felt combustible. Cher leaned forward in her chair, her long nails tapping against the armrest in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Joy, refusing to yield, crossed her arms, her voice dripping with sharpness. "You've made a career off shock value," Joy jabbed, her tone tinged with disdain. "Half the time you weren't selling music, you were selling spectacle. Outfits, stunts, attention. You weren't a role model, Cher. You were a distraction." The audience gasped at the audacity of the remark. A few nervous laughs fluttered through the air, but most people knew Joy had crossed into dangerous territory. Cher's dark eyes narrowed, and her voice dropped into that signature smoky register that always commanded the room. "You think I survived 6 decades in this business by being a distraction," she said, her tone low but cutting. "Honey, you've been sitting at this desk for years throwing opinions around. I've been out there breaking barriers when people like me told women to shut up and sing. The only spectacle I've ever been is a woman refusing to stay in the box men, and sometimes women like you, tried to shove me in." The audience erupted in applause, whistles cutting through the tension. Joy adjusted in her seat, her jaw tightening, but she wasn't done. "You say you broke barriers, but let's be honest, you also played into them. The costumes, the headlines, those weren't about empowerment, they were about selling yourself. And I think that sends a very mixed message, especially to young women watching." The word selling hung in the air like an insult. Cher tilted her head, her lips pressing into a thin smile. "You know what's funny, Joy?" Cher asked, her tone razor-sharp. "When a man reinvents himself, when he uses style or shock or whatever it takes to stay relevant, he's called innovative. When a woman does it, she's called desperate, or worse, a sellout. That's the double standard you've spent years pretending to fight against, but here you are, spitting it right back at me." The crowd thundered in agreement, clapping so loudly that the producer struggled to wave them back down. Joy's face flushed, but her stubbornness only deepened. "That's not what I'm saying," Joy snapped. "What I'm saying is, you, Cher, built an empire off making people look at you instead of listen to you. And don't twist this into some feminist lecture. This is about truth." Now the air felt electric. Cher leaned closer, her voice fierce and unwavering. "Truth? Let me tell you about truth, Joy. The truth is, I came from nothing. I was told I had no talent, no future, no place. The truth is, I clawed my way through an industry run by men who tried to own me, silence me, use me.
And every time I wore something outrageous or did something bold, it wasn't because I wanted attention, it was because I refused to let them write my story for me. That is empowerment. That is truth." The audience leapt to its feet, clapping and cheering, some chanting her name. Cher's words carried the weight of lived experience, every syllable dripping with defiance. Joy tried to speak over the noise, but her words were drowned out. Finally, when the applause simmered, she raised her voice, almost shouting, "You think you're the only woman who's fought against the system? Please, there are thousands of women who did it with dignity, without turning themselves into a sideshow." Cher froze for a beat, then gave a slow, deliberate smile that cut like a blade. "Dignity," she repeated. "You don't get to define dignity for me or for any woman. Dignity isn't about how much skin you show, or how quiet you stay, or how acceptable you make yourself. Dignity is living your truth so fully that no one, not men, not critics, not even a woman on a daytime talk show, can take it away from you. And if my version of dignity looks different from yours, that's your problem, not mine." The audience roared again, the sound echoing like a wave crashing over the studio. Even Whoopi raised her eyebrows, meaning back as if to say, "Well, there it is." Joy's face hardened, but for the first time her retorts faltered. Her lips parted as if to argue again, but nothing came out. She glanced toward the audience, clearly shaken by the overwhelming support Cher was receiving. Cher, however, wasn't done. She turned toward the crowd, then back to Joy, her voice ringing clear and unflinching. "For decades, people have tried to tear me down. They've called me too much, too old, too strange, too everything. But you know what I learned? Being too much is exactly what made me survive. And if that makes you uncomfortable, Joy, maybe it's because you've always been afraid to be too much yourself." That final line detonated in the room like a bomb. The audience erupted, half rising to their feet, clapping and screaming. Even Whoopi sat in stunned silence, caught between the spectacle and the raw honesty unfolding before them. Joy's face burned crimson. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words seemed to wither before they could escape. Cher had taken the moment, flipped the power dynamic, and left Joy standing on unsteady ground. The camera zoomed in on Joy's face, then on Cher's calm, unshaken expression. The clash had escalated beyond a talk show spat. This was history being made in real time, a cultural reckoning disguised as daytime television. The emotional flashpoint had arrived, and there was no turning back. The studio, already simmering with heat from the verbal sparring, felt like it was seconds away from boiling over. Every camera operator leaned in, every audience member perched on the edge of their seat. You could almost hear the hum of anticipation. Something was about to give. Joy Behar, her jaw clenched tight, finally let her guard slip. Her voice rose, sharper than before, almost cracking at the edges. "You know what, Cher? Enough of this holier-than-thou act. You sit here pretending you're some warrior for women, but really, you've been chasing fame your entire life. Admit it. You don't care about empowerment. You care about being worshipped." The words hung heavy in the air, poisonous and personal. A hush fell across the audience. Even the co-hosts froze, wide-eyed, unsure if they should intervene. Cher didn't flinch. She sat back, her face composed, her expression of almost dangerous calm. Then, in a voice steady as steel, she answered, "You think I need to sit here and be worshipped, Joy? Let me tell you something. I've been worshipped, and I've been ridiculed. I'd been put on a pedestal, and I've been dragged through the dirt. And I survived all of it because I know who I am. That's what scares you, isn't it? That I don't need your approval. I never did." The audience burst into applause, clapping so hard that the sound threatened to drown out the microphones. But Joy wasn't finished. She leaned across the table now, pointing a finger toward Cher. "You call that survival? I call it ego. You built yourself into a brand, not a human being. And now you're sitting here lecturing me about dignity and truth? Please, you've made a career out of selling the illusion of Cher. You're not a symbol, you're a product. The insult stung. The entire room gasped, and for a beat the cameras caught Cher's eyes narrowing, her jaw tightening. This wasn't just professional critique anymore. Joy had gone for the jugular. Then Cher leaned forward, her voice no longer calm but thunderous, each word slamming into the silence like a drumbeat. A product? You dare call me a product? Let me tell you what I am. I am the little girl whose father walked out. I am the woman who worked 3 jobs before I was even 20. I am the artist who stood on stage while people booed me and I kept singing anyway. I am the mother who raised her children under the brightest, cruelest spotlight in the world and never let them break me. That's not a product, Joy. That's a survivor. That's a fighter. That's a woman who refuses to disappear, no matter how badly people like you want her to. The eruption of applause this time was deafening. People rose to their feet, cheering so loud that Joy had to fight to make her voice heard. Her composure cracked fully now, her words coming out in a near shout. You think yelling makes you right? You think the audience clapping makes you a saint? You brainwashed people into thinking you're untouchable, Cher. But you're not. You're just another celebrity who can't stand being told the truth. The producers were in chaos, signaling from behind the cameras to keep things under control. Whoopi leaned in, trying to interject, but Cher raised her hand slightly, commanding silence. The power in that small gesture was undeniable. You want the truth, Joy? Cher said, her tone quiet but lethal. The truth is, women like you spend their lives tearing other women down because deep inside you can't stand the ones who dared to live bigger than you did. You don't hate me because of my costumes or my career. You hate me because I became everything you were too afraid to be. The audience howled with approval, standing now, clapping and cheering. The co-hosts looked stunned, caught in the whirlwind. Joy sat frozen, her face flushed, her fists clenched against the desk. For a moment the cameras caught it all. Cher towering in her strength, Joy trembling with fury, and the audience erupting into what felt less like applause and more like a rallying cry. Joy slammed her hand on the table, her voice breaking as she tried one last desperate jab. You're delusional, Cher, completely delusional. Cher didn't miss a beat. She turned her head slowly, fixing Joy with a look so fierce, so piercing, it could have cut glass. Then she delivered the line that would replay on social media for weeks. If being delusional means believing in myself when the world told me to sit down, then baby, I'll be delusional until the day I die. The crowd exploded. People screamed, clapped, stomped their feet. It was pandemonium. Even the co-hosts couldn't hide their awe. The camera cut back to Joy, but the look on her face said it all. She had no comeback. Not this time. This was it, the breaking point. Joy's attempt to corner Cher had imploded, and instead Cher had turned the moment into a triumph of raw truth and resilience. The studio wasn't just witnessing daytime television, it was witnessing history.
The show cut to commercial break with the audience still on its feet, buzzing like a stadium after a championship game. Producers rushed to the stage, trying to calm both women. Joy sat stiff in her chair, her face flushed, avoiding eye contact with Cher. Cher, meanwhile, leaned back, collected but visibly drained, like a fighter who had gone 12 rounds and still stood tall. When the cameras came back, Whoopi Goldberg did her best to steer the conversation elsewhere, but the atmosphere was irreversibly changed. The segment that was supposed to be a discussion about women in media had transformed into one of the most explosive confrontations daytime television had ever seen. The fallout was immediate. Clips of the clash flooded social media before the hour was even over. The moment Cher delivered her searing line, "If being delusional means believing in myself when the world told me to sit down, then baby, I'll be delusional until the day I die," was replayed thousands of times, cut into TikToks, stitched with fan reactions, and quoted across Twitter and Instagram. Headlines followed within hours. Entertainment Weekly, Cher stuns The View with fiery showdown against Joy Behar. The Guardian, Cher defends legacy, sparks viral moment in daytime TV clash. People Magazine, Cher shuts down Joy Behar in explosive exchange. The story wasn't just about celebrity drama anymore, it struck a nerve. Older women especially lit up comment sections, sharing how they had been dismissed, criticized, or underestimated in their own lives, and how Cher's words gave them the courage to push back. Younger women posted about how Cher had modeled unapologetic confidence in the face of hostility. For once, the internet was united. Cher wasn't just defending herself, she was defending every woman who had ever been told to quiet down. Joy Behar, however, faced a different wave of attention. While some loyal fans defended her as asking the tough questions, the overwhelming response skewed negative. Critics accused her of ambushing Cher, of crossing the line from journalism into personal attack. Hashtags like Team Cher and Respect Cher trended worldwide, while Joy's name was tied to words like bully and bitter. Behind the scenes, sources reported that Joy was furious. According to one producer, she felt ganged up on by the audience's reaction and humiliated by the viral blowback. Some speculated she considered walking off during the commercial break, but chose to stay to avoid looking weak. Cher, on the other hand, embraced the moment. Rather than downplay the clash, she leaned into it. That evening, she posted a simple tweet. "Say what you want. I'll always stand tall." Strong emoji, sparkles emoji. Hashtag believe in yourself. The tweet racked up millions of likes in less than a day. Fans and celebrities alike chimed in with support. Dolly Parton called Cher a force of nature. Viola Davis praised her for showing the kind of courage women everywhere need. Even politicians weighed in, citing Cher's words as a rallying cry about resilience and self-respect. For The View, the rating spike was undeniable. That episode became the most watched of the season, drawing in millions of additional viewers on replay. ABC quickly released official clips on YouTube, where they garnered millions more. For the network, it was a goldmine. For Joy, though, it was a nightmare. In the weeks that followed, Joy addressed the confrontation briefly on air, insisting she had no regrets. But the damage to her image lingered. Interviews and columns scrutinized her role, questioning whether her confrontational style had finally crossed a line. Cher, meanwhile, only grew stronger from the ordeal. The clash gave her new relevance, sparking renewed interest in her career, her advocacy, and her long fight for women's empowerment. The legacy of that moment extended far beyond the studio. College classes dissected the confrontation as a modern example of women navigating power dynamics in public life. Social media dubbed it the daytime showdown. Clips of the exchange are still circulated whenever discussions of resilience, ageism, or female rivalry resurface. For Cher, it was another chapter in a career defined by reinvention and resilience. She had turned what could have been a humiliating ambush into a historic stand, one that inspired millions. For Joy, it was a cautionary tale, proof that sharp wit and sharp words can sometimes cut too deep, leaving scars not just on others, but on one's own legacy. In the end, the clash became less about Cher versus Joy, and more about what it represented, the battle between tearing others down and lifting oneself up. Cher walked away stronger, her voice echoing long after the cameras stopped rolling. And Joy? She was left with a question she could never quite escape. What happens when the punchline backfires and the world stops laughing with you? The episode would forever be remembered as the day Cher didn't just defend herself, she defined herself, once again, in front of the entire world.